Hello and welcome to a Blaseball Statistical History, a look at the Ohio Worms development across the expansion era. The Ohio Worms are a new addition to the ILB in the expansion era, falling through the breach during Season 12 alongside the Crabs, Georgias and Mechanics. All their players are evolved to Base 1, which is needed as the team does not look like a dominant force that might have 4 championships to its name. They also come with the Bottom Dweller modification, which means any time they finish last in their division, all their players improve by up to 5%. Which occurs immediately, as due to arriving late in the season and not playing any games, the Worms come last in their division and joint last in the league. They are able to partake in the election and use their wills to steal Pitching Machine from the garages and to infuse Huber Frumpel, who is unfortunately taken by the Pies. But the team do benefit from a Moist Talker's blessing as their lineup is boosted. Pitching Machine is a great addition, and thanks to the blessing and Bottom Dweller, the team already looks stronger. But this is not enough, and in their first playing season, they come bottom of both division and league again. They lose 7 wins to the Black Hole, and Sun 2 only activates for their opponents. They have 1 negative and 1 positive blood rain, and 2 players are briefly swept elsewhere. They sadly face their first incineration, but as they set a new party time record, reaching it on day 67, they benefit from 19 parties. Finishing last not only activates their Bottom Dweller boost again, but also entitles them to 3 wills, which they use to plunder Pitching Machine from their own team, done to prevent any other team taking them. They take Nan from the Firefighters, and give Pitching Machine the Uncertain modification. Then, like last season, they benefit from some other teams' blessings, as the Tacos give Wild lower batting boost, the Flowers give a base running boost, the Spies give a defence boost, and the Sunbeams give a pitching boost. Nan is a worse pitcher than Wanda was, but the rest of the team has jumped up in power, suddenly looking competitive. And they wiggle their way up to 15th in the league. They lose Nan back to the Firefighters in a feedback swap, but gain Rivers Rosa. They also lose Wyatt Mason 8, who they gained in the late siesta, as they echo into Static. Then they lose 2 players to Elsewhere, and only 1 returns. But they do gain 5 parties. They use their wills to steal Luis Acevedo from the Crabs, and bring Zandra Pancakes onto the rotation. They also win their first blessing, gaining the modification Jam-Packed. A stronger-looking rotation now matches the lineup. Yet they slide back down to 21st in the league, as the weather is against them once more. They do see the return of Scratch from Elsewhere, and get another 5 parties. Their low finish grants them 3 wills, so they move Ephraim Ladd to the Shadows, and give Luis Acevedo a transfusion, before sending them back to the Crabs in exchange for Jacoby Podcast. The Worms win 2 more blessings, as Pitching Machine's divinity is impaired, and the Shadows' pitching is adjusted. With another Bottom Dweller boost, the shorter team has some real power, which sees the Worms shoot up to 3rd in the league, qualifying for their first postseason, which they are knocked out of in the Division Series by the Spies, after both teams gained wins from Sun 2 in their second match to draw at 3 games each. They finally gain a win from the weather, and whilst Vesalius Sunday has a negative blood rain, Cantus Hoyo defends against a consumer attack, and Pitching Machine only spends 8 days elsewhere. In the election, they give Patchwork Sathwick a transfusion and move Cantus Hoyo to the Shadows. They say goodbye to Pitching Machine as the Lovers take them, and the Wild Wings also make a player trade. But another blessing boosts their Shadows batting. The rotation holds strong, but the lineup looks a bit patchy. They only drop to 8th in the league, but 4th in their division, so no postseason. They gain a win from Sun 2, and gain Igneous de la Cruz from the Sunbeams in a feedback swap. Lenny Crum spends 2 days elsewhere, Farrell Seagull is consumed, but Rivers Rosa gets to party. They also gain the attractor Tad Seath, after Lubert Giun bats them in. Their wills are used to give Jacoby Podcast a transfusion, and to grant themselves home field advantage for the next season. Not much change overall. But the Worms drop again, to 12th. It's a tricky season, as they lose 2 wins to Black Hole, Kichiro Guerra has a negative blood rain, 2 players spend over 20 days elsewhere, and the Worms face 12 consumer attacks, only able to defend against half of them, so even 6 parties don't help. They do get 3 gifts, with soul patches for the regularly consumed players, an item and a replica of York Silk. The Worms also set a new record for the longest game, as their match against the Miami Dalle lasted 22 innings, resulting in a spillover. In the election, they move Zandra Pancakes to the Shadows and revoke Tad Seath. They do gain a roaming player, as Stu Briggs joins from the Shoe Thieves, and the Millennials trade Kichiro for Andrew Solis. The second half of the lineup is really lacking, and after so many consumer attacks, the rotation now opens weak. But in Season 19, being bad is good, and the Worms finish 5th in the league, qualifying for another postseason. They are knocked out in the Division Series by the Flowers, but do join the rest of the league in the seasonal reading, as Farrell Seagull becomes uncertain. The weather isn't much of a help, but Jacoby Podcast does get a party. Trips to elsewhere rise dramatically, with 5 players being swept away. Then tragedy strikes, with 2 negative blood rains and the incineration of Igneous de la Cruz. The team get 2 gifts, as Andrew Solis becomes ambitious and Rivers Rosa gains an item. With their wills, the Worms choose to bring a frame lad onto the lineup and steal Parker Meng from the Crabs. They also win 2 blessings, as Scratch becomes cluttered and the team avoids subtraction, instead making the Moist Talkers' Cedric Spliff a subtractor. Ephraim is a good addition to the lineup. With things being back to normal, the Worms fall to 17th overall, but this does qualify them for the under bracket, where they are eliminated in the wildcard round by the Lift. The weather was against them, and whilst Lenny Crum returns, 4 more players head for elsewhere, including 2 who don't return. But on the positive, all 3 consumer attacks are defended against, and the Worms benefit from 8 parties. This season, the Worms get 4 gifts, as they gain 3 items and become early to the party. In a busy election, the Worms bring Zandra Pancakes onto the rotation, sending Rivers Rosa to the Shadows, who they then move to the Shadows again. The Millennials reverse Season 18's trade, sending Kichiro Guerra back, and the Worms win 3 blessings, as 1 player on each Wild Low team gains the modification Green Light. The Worms become heavy-handed, and their Shadows gain items. They also gain a player, as Pudge Nakamoto roams from the Spies. The rotation is a lot healthier, and the lineup contains a lot of stars. The Worms only finish 11th this season, but as they are second in their division, qualify for the postseason. However, they are knocked out by the Spies in the wildcard round. They are helped on their way by 13 additional wins from Sun 30 and 2 parties. 4 players are unstable, but all survive, and another 4 players are swept elsewhere. The team also managed to defend against all 12 consumer attacks. Another 4 gifts mean the Worms can have 3 replicas of the Dynamic Duo and Chorby Soul, as well as an item. Having become heavy-handed in the last election, adding Chorby Soul to their team sends them dropping down the depth chart, as Chorby's Soul is very heavy. They reach the bottom and release Pickled Herring into the ILB. They use their wills to infuse Rivers Rosa and to magnify L'Aubergine. They also gain Jasper Blather, who roams from the Sunbeams. With the addition of a 3rd, the Worms seem to be collecting roaming players. This is not the most helpful for their lineup. And the Worms fall to 15th in the league. They are wildcarded into the under bracket, but once again are eliminated straight away by the Spies. During the season, they gain 7 wins from the weather, enjoy 14 parties, and defend against the only consumer attack. But things take a turn, as 6 players spend time elsewhere, and Rivers Rosa is stolen by the Tacos. Voicemail tries to help by making 6 lineup changes. The Worms only get 2 gifts, but they become fireproof and get a replica of New Meganito. Their wills are used to claim Dudley Mueller from the Pies and to infuse Crow Madrigal. The Wild Wings want to make a player trade, and due to a blessing, they have to send a player to the garages. Then they win a blessing, making one player on every other team skipping, but have subtractor inflicted on them by the Friday's similar blessing. Voicemail and the parties have done some hard work on the team, and they look strong, which they prove as they shoot up to 3rd overall, and all the way to the final of the postseason, missing out on their 5th championship by 1 game. They benefit from 11 wins from the weather, and although the rotation is reverbed, with just 3 pitchers it's not a big impact. Voicemail has settled down, making just 1 batter change, but elsewhere hasn't, as 5 more players are swept away. The Tigers steal a Shadows player, and Pudge Nakamoto is incinerated for the 2nd time, and replaced by Scoobert Toast. They get 2 more gifts, becoming late to the party, and Scoobert Toast becomes ambitious. In the election, they opt for the roamless party favour, and join the rest of the league in becoming under review. They win 2 blessings, as Scoobert becomes a credit to the team, and claim their Season 20 modification again. They send a Shadows player to the Tacos, but benefit as the Sunbeams get a divisional walk in the park blessing. Stu Briggs roams on to the Tigers, but after the semi-centennial in which 2 worms play, they return with another teammate from prehistory, Rosales Darkness. Heading into the final season, the team looks very strong. Vesalius has returned as a pitcher and fits in quite well. In Season 24, the Worms finished 2nd in their new division of the Horizon, and 16th of the original 24 ILB teams, as they were nullified on day 80 when the black hole started expanding. Before that point, they gained 10 additional wins from the weather, had 5 parties, defended against 2 of the 3 consumer attacks. They experienced 2 night shifts, but Fax Machine reverses one of them. In Season 24, the Worms head straight for the black hole, being the first team to reach it, and they stay there until their nullification. During the expansion era, the Worms faced 3 incinerations, 2 feedbacks and 1 reverb, as well as benefiting from the most parties in Wild Low, with 66. They didn't have any peanut reactions. They had 5 negative to 1 positive blood rains, but during the semi-centennial, a Worms player did siphon some of Parker Macmillan's blood. They had the most negative black holes of Wild Low with 20 to 8 positive, and Sun 2 was also against them, with 14 negative to 5 positive. None of their players were shelled, 4 were unstable, the most of the division, but they saw no observations or redactions. They had 2 night shifts, 7 voicemails and 1 fax machine, whilst they lost 2 Shadows players to Thieves Guilds. 32 players were swept elsewhere, with the longest stay being 65 days. They gained 36 wins from Sun 30, but faced 33 consumer attacks. Their Arcana the Fool appeared in 1 seasonal reading. They competed in 4 postseasons, but didn't win any, coming runner-up once. They also played in 2 underbrackets, once as a wildcard. They were given 17 gifts, used 24 wills, and won 12 blessings. At the end of the era, the Worms are entangled in the black hole. Their team is longer than average and contains quite a few strong players. They could be a force to reckon with, but it would depend on who they were to play against. Thank you for joining me for another Blaxplanation. I'll be back with more Blaseball fun and facts soon, but until then, rejoice, play ball.